Thank you. It's great to see you all here. I'll dive into it. I've been asked to talk about understanding Aarhus, and I always start with this picture this year because this is the start of the European Capital of Culture. Right outside our window here, there's over 70,000 people celebrating this event. You may remember this image. I presented this in Birmingham at the Congress there, suggesting the idea of coming to Aarhus, and now we're here. Obviously some changes have taken place. But of course this whole idea, and Juliana will talk a lot more of this, but the whole mindset of Aarhus is in a transition. And it's important because we're becoming more and more international. Earlier in the 1900s we had a big event in Aarhus called the National Exhibition, and that actually made Aarhus the main second city outside of Copenhagen. So this is like another mindset change. So 100 years later we're moving forward into a much larger forum. This image is actually here, right next to where this building is, the former tax building, harbour tax building, and the building is positioned right there 100 years ago. And the dock is just outside. Looks like this now. So that picture before was just here. This whole transition has taken place over the last 20 years. Who would have thought this 20 years ago? Things like these activities were taking place right out in front of us in the new harbour. It's happening very quickly. This image was taken in 2007, where we have a container harbour. This became dormant because the waters weren't deep enough. C.F. Muller, the office here, actually designed the new container harbour further out, where the world's largest container ships coming in and out. But this picture here is from 2015. If you just go back and forth, you'll see quite a lot's been happening. If I do another one in 8 years' time, this whole area here will be transformed, and this whole area will be built, finished, and this whole area down here is finished, 140,000 square meters. So amazing things are happening as we speak. And Jakob mentioned about the speed of development. This is where I come in, the quality controller. But if you ask anyone in Aarhus what makes Aarhus tick, about 30% will say it's because we have fantastic nature close by. It's in walkable or cyclable distance. We have this beautiful valley, beautiful bay. There's two bay cities in Denmark. One is in Køge, New Zealand, and the other one is here in Aarhus. And this beautiful valley with these forests on either side just makes Aarhus quite unique. The other third will say it's a university town. We have 330,000 people in Aarhus, and about 52,000 are students in higher education. That's quite a big portion, and it's an important driver for the city. We have lots of cluster developments, for example, Agro-Foods Park here in the northern part of the city. This is a master plan we've just completed in a competition. It's built at this point here, this much. But the idea of building these knowledge-based communities on the outskirts of the city and in the city is something we're working very heavily with. This is Northern Europe's largest hospital. We'll drive past it this afternoon on our drive-through in the bus. A city with around about 40,000 people there on a daily basis. Patients, colleagues, not colleagues, yes, at the psychiatric department. Doctors and nurses and the services and patients and their families. So we have two light railway stops at this point. C.F. Muller are also the architects for this project, together with Google Architects. We also have projects like this with the windmill capital of the world here in Aarhus, and it's a knowledge-based industry, so they have their research and development often here in Aarhus. And thirdly, this whole thing about culture. I think they say 38% of the population say this is the most important thing that makes Aarhus unique. And Juliana's talked more about this. We have these beautiful buildings just outside the window here, the Aarhus. It's fantastic. I mean, if you Google Aarhus, these things just are all over the place. And of course this building here, and we're going to see this. I mean, tomorrow we're there, in the Aarhus. This afternoon we'll be here at Morscore Museum for a short period of time. And this, incidentally, was one of those occasions where we had the Red Worm, I translate it directly, a performance here of one of the 12 Full Moons projects, where 100,000 people saw a theatre performance in the air. Naturally, it was fantastic. And a smaller project, you'll see out the window here, the farm building by C.F. Miller. Formerly 10,000 guests a year, now 80,000. Just because of this small, I call it acupunctural type of activity development. And we have our own Dome of Visions. This is owned by the council. It's my magistrate in the council, technical and environmental services. We use it as a kind of a livable city lab, an opportunity to meet and talk about the city development. And this one just along the coast, the Bridge Infinity, Infinity Bridge, designed by a young couple of architects, was made for a cultural event called the Sculptures by the Sea, but it was so popular by the population that we've actually found the money to make it permanent, the council. And of course, a project like this, when you Google Aarhus, this comes up too. Although it's not culture in the formal sense of the word, it's something about the image and the branding of the city. Yeah. This is important when we talk about how the city develops and how we understand Aarhus. We saw the town hall last night, 31 members, and we have a strong governance, especially when we talk about these major urban developments. We have it's an important driver for the nation, but the city's going like mad. We've got business region Aarhus, we have 19 councils in this region, and 12 of them are in this council. And when you're together, there's 1.2 million people, so we have clout when we're discussing with these ones over here. Being a second city, we extended. So it's 1.2 million people within an hour's drive of Aarhus. So we're growing, and we just every 4 years we make a new strategy for the city, and this is the one we're working with at the moment. These are the 4 cornerstones. We're gearing ourselves to become a larger city. And this area here becomes really important for me, the livability and the quality of the city. Please come in. Last year there's 5,000 new inhabitants moving to Aarhus. If you follow this path, by 2050 we'll be 450,000. So we're trying to plan the city for this growth. So we're trying to think of smart growth in the way we're developing the city. So one of the cornerstones is that we've been growing like mad since the 50s. You see that map? And we have to try and control it. This image here illustrates a comparison between Atlanta, it could be Phoenix, it could be Houston, and Barcelona, the same population, but the same scale, but the footprints are very different. So I use this slide to try and explain why we're going to densify the city. But we're also building new towns, and we're going to drive past one of them, which is starting up on the northern part of the city in the afternoon, Lisberg. And all these brownfield sites are also where we're developing the city. The other strategy is following the light railway line, developing city along the stations. We understand from evidence that development around these stations will certainly help reduce the amount of car use. And this is something we're very conscious of in terms of public transport. And this is a project, although in Danish, it's what Jakob was talking about. We know, it's proven now that these urban interventions actually increase value. And this will be the same along the light railway route. So we imagine in 30 years' time, some of these hubs become important centres throughout the city. So it's not just confined in the middle, we are choosing certain points to focus. And I designed this, together with some Italians and Germans. And you'll see it wandering around the town whilst you're here. But unfortunately, it's opening first on the 23rd of September, so you're going to miss that one. But when we did the ring road in Aarhus, there was only 400 cars in Aarhus. So what I do with this slide is to say that the councils are very visionary, I think, in terms of their planning. And of course you have sustainability agendas and the livability processes. But this densification of the city does actually cause friction. We have the largest private housing estate in Denmark, in Aarhus, these villas. And one person has a footprint of about 55 square meters. This is unheard of. We're talking about 5.5 square meters down on the island out there, north, east. We have these developments as well during the 70s. This is Gellup, we'll see this afternoon in the bus, where we're trying to develop the way we densify these cities. This is an illustration from one of the books. I think Kevin's Places for People. I've stolen it from that booklet to try and explain how we work with densification, the different models, how we arrange the community around these different models. And I know whenever we remove a building, there's a public outcry. This is the one on the harbour front. I think when you were here last time, this building was still in existence, but it's been removed now to make a beautiful big square. You'll see that down there later. But we can be doing master plans for large housing projects on the outskirts of town where there's hardly any confrontations in terms of planning or local communities. But you do a project like this in the middle of the town, you can have articles in the newspaper for days and weeks on end. So this is causing a challenge for us. And also this old idea of local neighbourhoods. You'll see this morning when you go for a walk down the town. These small communities are very conscious of their local environment. So when we do increase density, they are very interested in how that's done. So, people first. This is the way we're working in our city now. We ask the developers, first of all, it used to be design a building and there's some space left over. Now we're turning it around and we're asking the clients and the developers, what type of life do you want around this building, this community? Then you can design the space. And from once you've designed the space, you can design the building. It's a turnaround. And then we ask them, what does your building give back to the society? This is causing a bit of a discussion with the developers, but it's really good fun. We, of course, follow these discussions for the last 30 years. We know this, we know these conversations. We know Jan Gale and everyone working with these paradigms. But it's funny how it's taken such a long time to filter through into the way we're thinking. We have a national architectural policy. We have a local one where participatory design is one of the 5 key pointers. So we had a guest, Benjamin Barber, you've probably read his book, If Mayors Rule the World. And our own town mayor has written this book as well. It's called Willacy, and it's kind of root, shoot, a new way of developing the welfare society, where it becomes more and more locally anchored. And this weekend we have this amazingly big event taking place down in the Southern Harbour District called Rethink Activism. And that's where we have the Petri Kuchi talk tomorrow afternoon. But this whole idea of activating local communities, getting involved, getting engaged, is becoming a more and more important part of our thoughts and way of working. So active participatory citizenship, this is Captain Bunscore. And this whole rethink mentality has become firmly embedded in the way we're working with many projects within the city. For example, formal planning has often been one place, while citizen bottom-up thinking has been another place. Now we're talking about working much closer and making a co-creation or developing things together. And I think the council now is really very, very good at listening and talking about these possibilities. From Vancouver's, Jakob mentioned, we're working with surrogate communities to try and engage more people in the discussion rather than just, I call it the usual suspects getting engaged. We're actually writing to people and getting them involved. We're building 1,300 affordable housing in the next 4 years in Aarhus. And all the housing associations, I've made this booklet called Guidelines for the Affordable Housing to discuss where we're going, so that we're aligned in our attitudes and mindset about the quality of our projects, where these three cornerstones of the mentality are important: community, urban qualities, architecture and placemaking. And each one has a whole series of points. All their architects and their employees have this on their table. And I made it together with the housing associations, doing study trips, finding the best practices, using these as examples, and it's continually being developed. For example, here, we'll drive past it this afternoon, a new town for 25,000 people. And we have, in this instance, we have local community councils. I try to translate it, fællesråd in Danish. It's not a parish council, but it's something similar, where each community, we have 31 of them, is like a bridge builder with the council. And these small councils are also bridge builders to the local community. So we have a kind of a dialogue constantly with these communities. New ones are being made all the time. We have another one in the pipeline just up the road, which is being prepared. And of course, you're familiar with these community meetings, but we have lots of them. And we're designing these new buildings. These sustainable development in Lisbon is all made of timber, and the newest ones are finished. We won't see them in the flesh, but we'll drive past and see them. And another community for 15,000 people, a private development in a place called New, also on the light railway line. So these first houses here are being developed now on site, also made of timber and very highly sustainable. So this map, shows the income levels of Aarhus. The red are the wealthy, and the dark blue are the poorest. And the yellow is actually in between level. This is where all the students live, within the ring road. But the outer ring road, this is a blue line here. I could draw a line here connecting them all. And we have these communities, for example, in Gellerup, built in the 70s. Actually, it's roughly 50 years old from when they started building. And I think it's the same age as Milton Keynes. We have friends from Milton Keynes here. So how we develop these communities are important. So we've made a master plan for 10 years ago, and thinking around this to make it an attractive, integrated part of the city. And we have many plans, and I'll go through these this afternoon when we're out on site. But we're well on our way. But the point here is, how do we transform this to become more of this? And this is what we're working on now, 110 miles an hour. Talking about identifiable spaces, streets and squares, rather than lots of slope, space left over after planning. So this whole area is being transformed by making it more accessible. Lots of community meetings. And these youngsters. Our plans take 20, 30 years. They're going to miss out. So we've made this beautiful football pitch right in the middle of everything. And it's a melting pot for all the kids. And we've made this place called the Instant City. We're going to see that. Have a meeting here with the local community. It's just been a fantastic focal point. And it's a kind of a place where youngsters meet. So they're engaged in the project too. And this one is called the Gazelle Farm. It's a place for local entrepreneurship. And we have a guided trip around this afternoon. We're also we're walking the talk, from transforming it from a monofunctional district of affordable housing. We're also I've got 5 minutes. I'll try and speed up.
What number slide are you on, Stephen?
Oh, over halfway. This building, we're a 600 million corner. It's a place for 1,000 staff members. And the important thing is, it's right next to Bazaar West, on the main thoroughway. But right across from there, we're also building 400 student housing, with a ground floor which is designated to entrepreneurship. So the students moving in there, they must have some kind of entrepreneurship energy or nerve to be taken into consideration. So it's going to be a new source of income, a new development area. But this year also, one of the 12 full moon projects was held in Gellerup. And this for me, I know the red worm was very important culturally, but this was also magic in many ways because it meant that communities really engaged in the city and the way it's growing. There's 12 full moon projects across the whole of the region, and we're very happy to have one in Gellerup. We have other challenged housing districts along that ring road. We're making plans for them as we speak. So lots of money's been invested in them now. And we're introducing new types of housing in all these settlements. Another one here, which we'll see this afternoon, is Rosenhøj. It's just been awarded the best transformation project in Denmark. From these run-down concrete buildings, have been transformed into the most fantastic city. It's been a ghetto. It's been on the ghetto list. And now the housing associations say we've gone from the ghetto list to the waiting list. People want to live here now, and not just the people who've been there before, but you'll see this afternoon. It's really worthy. And now here, down in the Southern Harbour District, we have these old industrial sites, which were brownfield sites now, and this coal bridge here is one of the last artifacts left. And we're in the process of making a competition for the reinvention of this. I know we could liken it with the High Line in New York, but this becomes a really important openings move for the development of all this district. And you'll see those images and the boards for the competition in the venue where we have Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu event. But you can also go up and have a taste of what that space will be like when it's completed. But the important point here is, this is driven by a group of young people who want to make a difference and get engaged. They're called Bridges Friends, like Highline's Friends. It's a similar idea. But they've really anchored this project locally. And we're doing the project together with them. And we have also other types of citizens here, homeless and people who are challenged in many different ways. We're integrating them into our planning. So through this local office, we're actually building bridges with the local community. I'm one of them, you see it, one of my friends from this community. And this is the site here, the bridge down here. This is where the Pecha Kucha is, and this is where this local community for the friends are. And it's where we're going to be tomorrow afternoon. So we have a chance to engage in this. The whole of the Rethink Activism is run by this gentleman, and he's called Paul, and he's going to be doing one of the talks from the Rethink Activism at the Pecha Kucha. So you'll hear more about that. The other one is Goodsbane, the old freight yard. This is another fantastic community. One of the walks goes down there today. I think it's walk number 1. And Torben Brandy Nielsen is going to be your guide. A fantastic area under transformation. It's the 70 VAT registered small startup companies here. And it's another type of culture which is quite crazy. A new architect school is going to be positioned here, and it's in the process of going through the local plan. An international competition was held here. But it's also locally driven by people who are very engaged in this community. It's called Institute for X. This is Mas Peter and Christian. Johan. He calls himself the city architect of the Goodsbane. And so we have some interesting discussions. You'll meet him in an hour or so. But we're working with the city also with the experiments. We're transforming the green. We're trying to, for example, in the square in front of the cathedral, it was transformed into a forest for 10 days. And this was brilliant because it made a discussion in the council. And you're going to go down just next to the cathedral here and see this space, which has been transformed from this parking area into an urban green space. Shown here, the architects will be there to explain it for 2 of the groups which we're walking through there. So it's become a very popular place in the city. I think one of the other walks goes in a slightly different direction. I call it the Hygge, cosy walk. You've probably seen it in all those Danish TV series where they talk about hygge. This is very important for us. But on that walk, you'll see that you walk past this old churchyard, which has been transformed into an urban park. You can still be cremated or whatever here, but it's got to be another type of urban green space. And it's another way of rethinking these green areas, which become more amenity spaces. Finally, when we talk about urban flow and developments, Jakob talked about this river down here. We opened it up. There's 60,000 people go from the railway station up to the cathedral every day, back and forth. And it was like, what happens with the rest? Since we built this and opened up the river, there's developed this kind of flow around the space. And one of the interesting questions is, what do we do with the vicinity from the station to Docken? And I think my time has run out. Round off. The point is, we've introduced a loop, but we found actually that with the project where the old street food is, there's been 1.3 million people there in the first year. So there's a whole new flow developing because there's a new destination on the route. And this is really interesting for me, as a planner and urbanist. By planting or making possibilities for new incisions in the city, you can actually alter the way we use the city. And this has been really good. It just means that we have to integrate that into the planning for the rest of this district. And we have to take care of it because people love it. And that was that. Welcome to Aarhus.
Stephen actually broke PowerPoint. That many slides, you broke PowerPoint. That's what happens. I didn't introduce Stephen.